Welcome to the Autoparent podcast with my mom.
Hello, and welcome to the Autoparent podcast, episode 19, which we're calling The Candler Difference. And I'll tell you why. I'm your host, Pastor Casey Van Atta Casebeer, and y'all know me. So let's get to our special guest for this episode. Our special guest is Reverend Zach Moffat, and he is a senior pastor at Pulaski First United Methodist Church in Pulaski, Tennessee. He graduated from Candler School of Theology, along with the often referenced Reverend Corey Alexander Willett, and she has this running joke about the Candler difference, which is really funny. Zach is also a dad to twins, Emma and William, so welcome to the pod, friend. It is so good to, actually see your face.
It is so good to see you. Even if it's over Zoom, it's so good to see you.
I know, right? So what I want you to do first is just tell our listeners about some of the work that you've been up to, because I have the privilege of knowing about some of it and it's super exciting. And so I want you to share it with our listeners.
Yeah. So Pulaski First is in Pulaski, Tennessee, as Casey said. And Pulaski is a small rural town just about 20 miles north of the Alabama-Tennessee border. And we have a rural hospital in town. And like everyone probably knows, rural hospitals are struggling to help with patient turnover rate, to help with struggling with patient retention rates and patient recurrence rates. And so we have a small little Methodist college in town where they have a think tank called the Turner Center. And their ministry and mission is to help bring about economic and spiritual revival in rural communities across the country. And so we have partnered with the Turner Center to create something called the Rural Health Advocacy Network. It's this large umbrella to help residents of not only Pulaski and the county in which we reside, Giles County, but hopefully this is a model that other rural communities can take up. So we're partnered with our local hospital where doctors refer patients to us here at the church, and we're hoping to expand to other churches, and we partner them with patient advocates where the patient needs help remembering doctor's appointments. The advocate will help them do that. If they need help getting a ride to the hospital, they'll help facilitate getting a ride. If they have any questions, navigating insurance, all of those things that come with the complex healthcare system. That's one of the aims in which we're trying to help out with. We're also partnering with local clergy to create a chaplaincy group because most rural hospitals don't have spiritual health. And so, yeah, it's fun work, tiring work, exciting work.
Yeah, deeply, deeply important work.
Right.
Important and faithful work. And I am just so proud for you and excited about this initiative. I think it's really, really important. I also want to say too, as you were talking, I was hearing you say the word rural, which is how I say it too. And I was thinking people may not know that we're saying rural.
Yes.
We're talking about not urban, right?
Right.
We're talking about
urban,
rural areas.
Yes.
I get so much crap from the youth at Foundry, especially because they think I have a really country accent, which is really funny to me because I feel like I don't. But when I get tired, all bets are off. All bets are off, and it comes out, and it just is what it is. But they think it's hilarious how I say oil,
yes.
Vegetable oil, or aluminum foil,
or olive oil, yeah.
Or boil the water. They think that's hilarious. And I'm like, that's the only country thing I have in my accent. Most of the time people can't even tell where I'm from. So it's just hilarious to me. But anyway, as you were saying rural, I was like, I know exactly what he's talking about, but I wonder if everybody else does.
Yes, not urban.
Right. This work that you're doing is so important. I also I wanted to know if you would tell us a little bit about the car seat stuff.
Yeah. So one of the issues that we've run into right up front is this is a new initiative, and rightfully so, doctors are wary to trust this new initiative. And so we've been struggling to get patients. And so Reverend Alan Stanton, the director of the Turner Center, just point blank asked, well, what is it that you need? We're willing to help. And so the OB department at the hospital said, well, our nurses are buying car seats out of pocket because about 50% of the new parents who go through our hospital can't afford to purchase a car seat. And so Alan said, well, that's certainly something we can do. And so he called me and said, can the church do a car seat drive? I said, sure. And let's not make it just a First Methodist thing. Let's make it a Pulaski-wide, Giles County-wide thing. And up to date, our car seat drive was a month long. It officially ended April 15th. And at the end date, First Methodist alone collected 22 car seats, and we raised almost $3,000 to go to the car seat fund at the hospital.
That's amazing.
Which is amazing work. And then I talked with Alan a couple weeks ago about just to see how other churches did. And I don't have the official count of other churches' car seats, but he said one church alone, a smaller rural church, raised about $1,500 to go to the car seat drive. So it's just, we were blown away we weren't sure. I asked Alan, I said, what's your definition of success for this? And he said, if we can get 10 car seats, that's, and we were blown away by the response.
Yeah. Look at God, we might say.
Right. That's right.
That's amazing. Amazing. Okay. Well, now it's time for our special guest questions. These are questions that we ask every guest who comes on the podcast. It just is like the best way to get to know somebody, I think. So we're going to start off with, what is your biggest pet peeve?
Yeah. Kara, my spouse, will tell you that I have a lot of pet peeves. The biggest one that's been aggravating me the most is autocorrect on my phone, because I'll know that I'm trying to type something that I know is correct, and it'll autocorrect it to something that I don't want it to be. So, for example, we were making our shopping list last week, and we needed some Bisquick to make some good old waffles. And I typed in Bisquick, and it changed it to like Disquick. And I'm like, that's in like two separate words. I'm like, that's not. I want Bisquick, one word. Come on, auto. And like it took 4 times before my iPhone would accept that I'm spelling Bisquick.
Yeah. No, I hate that. What you may figure out quickly, listeners, is that both Zach and I are 1s on the Enneagram. And we have perfectionist tendencies, and we really like things to be done in a certain way. And it's very frustrating when you're trying to type something and you're doing it accurately, and autocorrect changes it. It's just, it screws up our whole worldview, really.
Right. It makes me doubt myself.
Me too. So I also have some autocorrect woes, but it's mostly just autocorrect changing this certain word to duck over and over again. It's very frustrating.
Yes, that happens too.
Okay, so I don't always sort of partake in the special guest questions, but this week I have something that's really annoying, and I'm just gonna own up front that it's a double standard, and I don't care. I'm here for it, and I just I need you to know that I'm full of shit, and it just is what it is. What has really been annoying me lately is that there's this whole movement of taking laundry products, like laundry detergent. Does this happen in your house? If it does, I'm so sorry. I'm about to offend you.
No, go ahead.
Laundry detergent and the things that you add to your laundry, taking them out of the containers that they're in and putting them in different containers. It's insanity. I don't know I don't know what is going on. I don't know why this is happening. It's very it's just ridiculous. It's a waste of time. You have to be buying the containers are always too big for the amount of product, so it looks ridiculous, and then you have to go buy more even though you don't need it. It's wasteful. It's just asinine is what it is. But here's how I'm full of shit. So I also, though, am obsessed with Home Edit, the show on Netflix that are this company that's based out of Nashville that edits people's houses. And so what I have done recently is I went to the Container Store and spent an obscene amount of money and bought all of these bins. I'm looking at them. They're all stacked up. So I have thousands of bins in my house where I take food out of boxes and I put it the boys' snack food or whatever. I take it out of the boxes and I put it in these bins. I'm so full of shit. I'm doing the exact same thing. But the laundry thing just really gets me for some reason. I'm what are you doing? You don't need to take your pods out of the bag and put them in a clear glass container. Nobody's looking at your laundry. Nobody.
No, we don't do that. We don't even do the pods. We just have the unhealthy liquid detergent that we just kind of just pour in the Yeah. I don't know, but as a one, the bin thing is feels justified, It just I can see that.
Feels
Well,
justified.
I mean, yeah, I can see that. I respect that.
Okay. Okay, so this is my favorite question that we get to ask, which is like, I always say this, it doesn't have to be a good story, just like the hardest time or a really hard time that you've laughed recently.
Yeah. Yeah, I laugh a lot. A nervous laugh. I laugh sometimes to like unhealthily suppress my anger. But the hardest time, there are two hardest times which I've laughed recently. Mine and Kara's favorite show is Schitt's Creek. And so like any time I watch Schitt's Creek. That's Someone sent me, I don't remember who, someone sent me the clip of when he and Moira are making the enchiladas.
Yes.
And they're trying to fold in the cheese. And I'm in my office cracking up. And our office administrator, Kim, is asking what I'm laughing at. And I'm like, Schitt's Creek. And she's like, oh, okay.
So good.
But we just roll on the couch laughing. And then the other story, it's regarding my son, William, who's 2.5. At the previous church in which I served, the church had a parsonage, which is they provided a house for us to live in, and it was across the parking lot from the church. And so we would go outside and play in the church parking lot because we were in the middle of nowhere. No one really parked there except on Sunday mornings. And so it was like mid-morning. I don't remember what day of the week it was. It was in the middle of the pandemic, so like no one was really working. And we were outside, and Karen and I are talking, and Emma's riding her little car thing around, and all of a sudden we hear dong, and we turn, and William had put a bucket on his head and walked smack dab into the basketball pole. I will say I was a good dad and didn't laugh until after he got up and went, "Ayote," which made it even funnier.
Oh my gosh. That is amazing.
We rolled laughing. And of course he thought it was funny because he was the center of attention at that moment. And for those who don't have twins or don't have multiple children, oftentimes they're vying to be the center of attention. And
yes.
so William thought it was hilarious that he made mommy and daddy laugh so hard. But we haven't laughed that hard in a long time.
That is so good. I love it. I love it when that happens, especially because like there's no recreating it, right? It's like a moment in time where it happens. And kids will often do this thing where they want to recreate the moment. So Riggs does that all the time where he says something to make us laugh and then he just says it's, until it's no longer funny, until we want to like cram a banana in our skull or something, which is great. It's great. I love it when that happens. Kids are the best.
Yes, they are. Well,
now it's time for a segment that we call Parenting Fails, Confessions, and Wins, FCW. So we're just going to start off with some parenting fails. So the parenting fail that I have for today involves my son Riggs. When he was born, he had this like curly hair, and we were like, what is going on? Because my hair is like pin straight. My husband has no hair. And so we were like, where did this come from? So we grew his hair out to where it was like really, really long because it was so curly and cute. And then when we moved here, we spent like, oh my gosh, every weekend of last summer at the beach. And it is really hard to get sand out of long hair. Like it's just really hard. So I got real frustrated one day and I was like, I'm cutting it. I don't care anymore. So I cut it. And then I was like devastated. So we've been growing it out since last summer. So his hair has been growing for a year. It's finally to the point again where because I thought like his curls would be gone, because when you give a kid their first haircut, usually, but they came back and I was like, oh my gosh, his hair is so cute right now. I love it so much. We're also like getting to summer. So I'm like, oh, am I going to cut it off again because of the sand? But he took care of that for me. And this week he found my hair cutting scissors, went and hid in a corner and cut the front part of his hair that goes right on his forehead. He cut it a literal 1/2 inch on his front head. So the rest of his hair is like super long and it's like sticking up like alfalfa in the front. And honestly, I can't bring myself to cut the rest. So I've been like swooping his hair over to like try to hide it, but it's those little pieces are still like sticking out. So anyway, that's my fail. What do you got?
Yeah. So this fail isn't recent, but it like still haunts me to this day because it's one of Kara's favorite stories to tell. So Emma and William were probably 3-4 months old at the time. And at this time, being new parents, let alone new parents to twins, like we still do the Walmart pickup, like no shame, just order online, go pick it up. It's great. At the time, we were living right outside of a larger city in Tennessee called Clarksville. So, it was 30 minutes to get to Clarksville to pick up, 30 minutes to get back. And it was a Friday, my day off, and the twins were still napping. And it was about time for me to leave. Well, it had been a busy week at the church. I felt like I hadn't seen much of Kara, much of Emma and William. And so I really wanted us to take a family trip. As stupid and silly, I know, but I wanted us to take a family trip to go pick up the groceries.
I'm already laughing.
And so Kara's like, we're not waking these babies up. And I'm like, well, it's like 2:30. Like, it's time for us to wake them up anyway. Very naive. And so finally, Kara, I think just out of frustration and sick of me just talking about it, said, fine, go wake them up and we'll go. So I go and wake them up. They're like happy to see daddy. They're happy, until we get in the car. And Casey, I kid you not, they screamed and cried from the entire time to Walmart, the entire time we had to wait in line to get the damn groceries, and the entire time back home. And Kara at some point, and it was like in the middle of rush hour in downtown Clarksville to go. So like, it wasn't a 30-minute drive. It was like an hour-long drive. Yeah. And so at some point at the height of their screaming, Kara looks at me and she says, how about this family trip, huh? And like, we were already frustrated and angry at just the scenario. And like, it was not a good moment. Yeah. It was not a good moment.
I bet you never made that mistake again, though.
No. No matter how much I wanted to take a family trip to Walmart of all places, this baby slept. And I just took my sad butt to the car and went and picked up her groceries.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I wish I could say
Hard fail.
That didn't happen to me, but I'm positive that it did. I mean, and our boys, neither one really liked the car at all, but Cash especially hated it. And neither one of our kids took a pacifier, which, like, I don't know. With Cash, I was like, oh, I guess this just is the way it is, maybe. Like, they just don't take pacifiers. And then I realized, like, no, they don't. Like, there are babies that fucking take pacifiers. Like, I was so frustrated. And had I known, like, had I had Riggs first, I would have had 1,000,000 babies. I don't know what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is that Cash was lucky he was first. Because if I had Riggs first and then I had Cash, I would have been like, oh my, what is wrong with this child? Like, he had that thing where he like threw up all the time, reflux or whatever.
No. Yeah.
Didn't take a pacifier, screamed every time we got in the car. Anyway, they had me thinking this was just how it was supposed to be. Ooh, you can convince me of a lot of things. Like, oh, it's just hard. I get it. It's just hard. Let's just do it this way then. And then I had Riggs and I was like, what? It didn't have to be this way. So God knew what she was doing when she gave me Cash first. Let me just say that. Let me say that.
Yeah, Emma liked the car. She would fall asleep easier. She didn't like the car, but she would fall asleep easier in the car. William he did not like the car.
Yeah.
Just did not like the car. There was one moment where he was like, we forgot to pull his little cover down over his carrier seat, and we were driving, and like the sun's really bright, and that was before we got that neat little shade that hangs on your car window. And he's like crying, and Kara looks back and she's like, he's literally staring into the sun. Like he's just crying and staring into the sun. Like, what are you doing, dude? So she had to unbuckle and turn his head away because he refused to look away, just like,
yeah. That kind of stuff used to make Greg so mad. He would just be like, what? Why are they doing this? Like, why can't they just not do this? Like, duh, it's hurting your eyes. It's making you cry. Stop doing it. And I was just like, ooh, I bet your mama has some stories about you.
Oh, I'm sure she does. I know she does.
Okay, so the driving thing, though, this is a good segue into my confession for this week, which is Greg got a new job. He's working outside of the home. I've had the kids home by myself until we could hire a nanny. We finally hired a nanny, yay, who will have started by the time this podcast releases, and I'm so excited. But the only way I've been able to manage the kids is by taking them out once a day and having to like do Zoom meetings from the car and like manage all of this stuff. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to take him to the playground, going to let him play. And then what I've started doing, and this is my confession, is after we leave the playground, I just drive. Like, I wound up in the middle of Fairfax County the other day, which, like, for reference, is far from where I live. I was like, where am I? Like, I was just driving. Like, I had gotten all the way to Dulles Airport, which is like, I live really close to Reagan Airport, but Dulles is like way up in the like left corner of Virginia, like outside of DC. And I was like, I don't know how I got here, but literally, like, my eyes were glazed over and I was like, we're just going to drive. Like, we're just going to drive. I don't care how far we have to drive, just to see if I could get Riggs to go to sleep. And he would. But of course, now I look up and I'm an hour from home. I'm like, this is not the same as driving Tennessee back roads, which is what I used to do, like through Cottontown. Yeah, so that's my confession, is that I've put like, I don't know, 1,000 miles in my car in the last 7 weeks. All right, do you have a confession for us?
I do. It's a silly confession. My spouse will pick on me for the fact that I'm a grown man who enjoys potty humor. Bathroom humor.
I'm a grown woman. I enjoy it as well. This is a poop-friendly podcast.
I think it's so funny that Em and William think it's so funny when they toot in the bathtub, or when like we're changing their diapers and they fart. And it's gotten to the point to where, because I laugh so hard, she'll like try and push out farts.
Oh,
and they
yeah,
go,
Riggs
Daddy,
says that.
I tooted.
Yeah.
And they go, It's so funny, and it drives Kara bananas because she just does not like bathroom humor.
Oh
and
my
she's
gosh.
like, stop teaching our kids to laugh at farting and using the bathroom. And I'm like, it's kind of funny.
It's so funny. I love it.
And I also love a good dad joke, but the confession part is I'm not good or witty enough to come up with a good dad joke. I just will laugh at a dad joke because I find them really funny.
I love a good dad joke. It's my favorite. Yeah. Greg, for Christmas from my aunt and her wife, got a book of dad jokes. And so occasionally he'll just like pick it up, like commit a couple to memory, and then just bring them out at the most like random times, which is my favorite thing ever. I love it so much. That's
my goal, is to memorize a couple when Em and William are older, and like when they have friends over, just pull them out to embarrass them. So.
Yes. Perfect. Oh my gosh. I love a good pun. Like I like some, highbrow, like super witty humor as well, but like give me a good pun and I'm so happy. Like I'm just so happy. Yes. Okay, so let's transition to parenting wins. This is my favorite part of the podcast. We always say, like, doesn't matter how you get them. If you get one in a desert of fails, or if you get them, consecutive, we'll take them however we get them. My parenting win for this week is that we're moving, and actually by the time this podcast releases, I will already be moved. And we have chores that the kids do around the house, and like they help pick up, and they throw away their own garbage, and like they do all that. But I just didn't expect a lot of help out of the move. I was like, clearly mom and dad are going to do most of this. So what I need you to do is just not screw it up. Like when I've packed something, like just know this is off limits. But what happened the other day is I was in the boys' closet, and I'm ashamed to say, like, maybe this is a confession too, but I found 2T clothes in our closet. And Riggs hasn't worn 2T clothes. Like, I'm not even sure he was wearing 2T clothes when he was born. Like, he was a big guy. Like, he's massive. And so he's been wearing 4T clothes since we moved here, which means that I knowingly packed clothes that were too small for either of my kids when we moved from Tennessee. And I just haven't in a year gone through the kids' clothes, which is on me. But, I'm going to give myself some grace because it's been a year.
It's been a year.
It's been a year. So anyway, I was in there and Cash came in there and was like, what are you doing? And I was like, well, I'm, attempting to organize your closet and get stuff ready for the move. And he was like, organizing? That sounds fun. And I was like, he is my child. And I was like, yeah, it is kind of fun, actually. And he was like, let me help. And I was like, oh, this is going to last like 5 minutes. He's going to get really irritated. That child stayed in there with me for an hour and a half and was so happy to do so. he kept saying, this is so fun. I can't believe we get to do this. Can we do something else next? And I was like, well, we're going to take a break because Mom is tired. But he worked for an hour and a half on organizing his closet. He did all the work. I really just kind of stood there and helped dictate, we need to keep this. We don't need to keep this. And then he moved on to his bathroom and did the same thing and organized all his bathroom stuff and put it in bins. And I was just like floored. I was completely floored. It felt like a parenting win.
That's a win.
Yeah. I was going to say, not even in the sense that I did anything right, but just that I get to be the parent to this kid, which is pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So I would love to hear about your parenting win.
Yeah. This happened like 2 nights ago. We don't give Emma and William a lot of sugar and a lot of candy. But this night, Kara had Skittles that she was eating. And I don't know. We just were like, well, sure, you can have some Skittles. And she was almost to the end of the bag. And so she gave some to Emma, she gave some to William, and then Kara ate, finished off the bag. And so William ate his really quickly because he's like, sugar, And then he was sad that they were all gone, and Emma still had a few left. And so she put some in her mouth, and then William started crying, and she went, Bubba's crying. And I said, yeah, Bubba's sad. He ate all of his Skittles. And so it's kind of gross, but she took out part of her chewed up Skittle and wanted to give it to her brother.
That's
so he
adorable.
would be happy. And it was so gross because she's got this chewed up Skittle in her hand. But it was so sweet that like she wanted to take care. And Emma's she's the oldest. She knows that she's the oldest. She's the oldest by 3 minutes.
Right.
But she acts like she's the older sibling. And she just wanted to care for her brother, make him stop crying. And Kara and I were just floored by, because typically we're that age where they're 2.5 and like everything is theirs, like mine, not Sissy's, mine, not Bubba's.
Yes.
And so they're just arguing and fighting all the time. And we were just floored that Emma wanted to share her Skittles with William, even though they were partly chewed up. And so it was a win in our book.
Yeah.
But of course we were like, it was very sweet, Emma, but like put that one back in your mouth.
I
you
was
can
just
give the
thinking,
one that you haven't chewed up yet.
Yes, exactly. I was just thinking about how most of the things that kids do are sweet and gross at the same time.
Right.
Most of the time. Like often when Riggs will come up to give me something or whatever, like he'll touch my hand and I'm like, why is everything sticky? Why
Yes.
are we doing this? So, yeah.
I'll just share another one where we're
Please.
trying to begin potty training,
Ooh.
which is an adventure in and of itself.
Mm-hmm.
But the other day, Emma said, Daddy, I've got to poop. And I said, okay, well, do you want to go sit on the potty? And she said, no, and then ran towards the couch. And so it was in the morning. I'm making lunch for them to go to preschool. And I look around, I'm like, Emma, it's time to go. Where are you? And she's sitting on her kitty potty, of course, still enclosed, still with her diaper on. But she went to go sit on the potty to use the bathroom. And I was like, yes,
Yeah,
we're
that's
slowly
a
getting
step.
there. Success.
Yeah, that's good. Riggs is 3. We're still potty training, obviously. And what he does when I say, do you want to go to the potty? Because it's very clear when he's got to poop. Like, and also you can hear him grunting from the other room. Like, it's a process. And he has to get completely naked he still has a pull-up on, but he will not poop if he's got clothes on, which is a problem when you're out at a restaurant, by the way. Which has happened. Literally, he came up to me while we were at a restaurant. Was like, take my clothes off. And I was like, no. Like, you will be constipated before you will be naked in public, child. So anyway, he often will just like retreat to another room and doesn't want to be looked at or seen. But every time I ask him if he wants to go to the potty, he's like, no. And then he runs around the corner, like hides in a closet, poops, and then comes out like he's like a queen and is just like, change me. Like,
I think it's a boy thing because William does something similar.
Yeah.
He very clearly has to poop, and I'll go, do you want to go sit on the potty? And he'll go, no. And then like he'll go in another room and we'll hear him grunting, or like in our living room we have a chair next to the TV and he'll like crawl behind the chair and hide.
Yep.
And like if he sees us looking at him, he'll turn his back.
That's
so, like,
what Riggs
he won't
does.
see us. And then when he's done pooping, he's like, I pooped.
Yeah, so happy. I'm just like, oh. When I get him out of the bath or the shower or whatever, he says, "Mommy, will you make me a princess?" And I take the towel and put it around him, and it's just like that. It's like he's just coming out with his like princess towel, and he's like, "I've done it. Like now is the time for you to change me." It's ridiculous. Well, this has been a segment called Parenting Fails, Confessions, and Wins, FCW. I want to remind you that if you have your own fails, confessions, and wins that you want to share with the podcast, you can do so via voice memo. We would love to hear your voice, or you can type it out to us on Instagram and Twitter at Autoparent. And now it's time to do a little something different. Now it's time for our Get Real segment, where each week we take the lectionary passage and get real. Our lectionary text for this week comes from Acts chapter 1, verses 1 through 11, the Ascension of Jesus. And here it is in the New Revised Standard Version. In the first book, Theophilus, I wrote about all that Jesus did and taught from the beginning, until the day when he was taken up to heaven, after giving instructions through the Holy Spirit to the apostles whom he had chosen. After his suffering, he presented himself alive to them by many convincing proofs, appearing to them during 40 days and speaking about the kingdom of God. While staying with them, he ordered them not to leave Jerusalem, but to wait there for the promise of the Father. "This," he said, "is what you have heard from me. For John baptized with water, but you will be baptized with the Holy Spirit not many days from now." So when they had come together, they asked him, "Lord, is this the time when you will restore the kingdom to Israel?" He replied, "It is not for you to know the times or the periods that the Father has set by his own authority, but you will receive power when the Holy Spirit has come upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth." When he had said this, as they were watching, he was lifted up, and a cloud took him out of their sight. While he was going and they were gazing up toward heaven, suddenly 2 men in white robes stood by them. They said, "Men of Galilee, why do you stand looking up toward heaven? This Jesus who has been taken up from you into heaven will come in the same way as you saw him go into heaven." This is the word of the Lord, interspersed with some baby shouts. And here comes some more.
It makes it more holy.
Yeah, right? Exactly. It's okay. All right, so let's talk about some initial reactions from this text. Why don't you go first? Just initial reactions.
Yeah, I mean, my initial reaction is every time I read this text, it's just like funny to me. Like still how the disciples just still don't get it. Like they're just like, "Jesus, you've been crucified, you've been raised. Is now the time? Like, are you finally going to restore the kingdom of Israel? Like, is now the time when you're going to get rid of these oppressive Romans?" And I can just imagine Jesus like face palming, like, "Guys, what? No, you've missed it." And like, it's so comforting to me as well that like, I'm in good company. Like we're all in good company, Even when we miss the mark, the disciples still, after 40 days of seeing Jesus risen, still have missed the mark. And then it gets even funnier, like Jesus is bodily ascended into heaven, and like just picture them like standing and staring like, "Well, what do we do now?"
Right. Right.
It's just a comical scene to me.
It is. It's comical to me too. I will say my first reaction is the really snarky, like, he presented himself alive to them by many convincing proofs. Yes. And yet they never get it. It's a remarkable how many times on the podcast we've referenced this, like how many signs the disciples get, how many, like there's this line from a podcast with Pastor Kelly Grimes, which came out recently, where Jesus asks to be fed, like hangry Jesus. And she says this thing like, maybe y'all figure it out while I eat this fish. And it's like, it's just something that plays in my mind over and over and over again. Like they didn't figure it out while he was eating that fish. Like they still haven't figured it out. And when they see him bodily ascend, like I just imagine, yeah, Like you, it's just like a dog that hears a whistle. Like,
Yeah. Exactly.
What?
And like these messengers, angels, whatever we want to call them, are like, why are you doing this? He's already told you. Jesus has told you what to do, to go and wait, which isn't an easy thing to do.
Right.
To go and wait. But he's like, he's already told you. So why are you still staring up in heaven?
It's like a child who lost their balloon. Like,
right. And like, while I laugh at the disciples, like a part of me is like, and I always tell the folks at Pulaski First this, like, as often as fun as it is to make fun of the disciples,
yes,
right? Scripture oftentimes is a mirror, and like, so while I'm laughing, I'm also like kind of crying. Inside my soul. Because like, how often am I staring figuratively, like asking for Jesus to do something when he's already told me what to do?
Yeah.
When God's already said, like, here's what you need to do. It's to love your neighbor as yourself, as difficult as it might be.
Yeah, I think that's a word.
Yeah. How often I think I get it, how often I think I get it, and then the Holy Spirit's like, no.
I said something recently to our confirmands that I think is speaking directly to what you're saying, which is that the day, like we were talking about doubt and how it's okay to ask questions and how it's okay to sort of interrogate. We were reading some Psalms that were lament Psalms, but also like interrogative. And so we were talking about this posture of prayer, really. And what I said was our inclination to think that we figured it out. It's a small leap from there to hate and oppression. Like it's a really small leap to take from I have figured it out to creating systemically oppressive systems. Like it's really not far.
No, it's not.
It's not. And so I actually think it's quite endearing to be like, well, I don't know what's going on. So yeah, I think it's super endearing that the disciples really haven't figured it out yet. I think it's actually kind of cool. And there's some solidarity in that for me of like, yeah, we're all just kind of figuring out this thing together. There's this cosmically big and beautiful thing that we've encountered and been a part of. And yeah, we don't really know how to make sense of it. Of course they don't. Like, of course we don't. And to me, it's just kind of like, it's kind of beautiful.
Yeah. No, it is like the very people who saw Jesus do all of these things, right? Even after this, still don't get it. And like, so 2000, give space for 2,000 years. And like, it is very endearing and cool and comforting that the church is still trying to figure it out. You know, like we're still trying to figure it out. And if the disciples haven't gotten it and they saw it firsthand, right, it's comforting. And it's also comforting, like the messengers I don't think they're words of condemnation. They're just like, hello, you know, he's told you what to do. So let's go and do it.
Yeah,
So.
I think the role of the messengers here is really important. And I'm wondering, where do you see those kinds of messengers in your own life, in your own ministry? If you could talk more about that.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good question. So in my own life, Kara is often a messenger. Mm-hmm. One of the churches I served was a very, very toxic church. There was some wonderful people there, but just they allowed their anxiety to get the best of them.
Oh, yeah.
It was a very anxious system. And so I was doubting myself, right? I was like their interpretation of my leadership capabilities. Like I was just doubting my calling, doubting myself. And I was just kind of word vomiting to Kara. And she just looked at me one day and she said, does your worth come from God or does your worth come from the people of this church?
Yeah.
And she said, I think you know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And like God has this amazing way of placing those people in our lives to like remind us that no matter what, as the Mark Miller song goes, no matter what people say, no matter what the world says, you are a beloved child of God. That's where our worth is defined. And then another person in my life who often serves as a messenger is my spiritual director. She's just wonderful. And God bless spiritual directors.
Right. Yeah.
We were talking about the one being a one. She's a one as well. And so we do some Enneagram coaching. And I was just talking about how, you know, all the stuff that's going on in life. And she said, and it's a mantra in my head now. She said, as a one, we take our emotions and we use them to fuel our actions. And she said, the challenge for a one is to sit and be still and see God in what you're feeling. So if you're angry, where is God in that anger? If you're sad, where is God in that sadness? If you're feeling betrayed, where is God in that betrayal? And that's a word in and of itself.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. And obviously I can totally relate to that. I think that our natural inclination in the midst of a pandemic, which I'll say is there are varying sort of degrees at which this pandemic has impacted people, right? There are some people who their lives really haven't changed all that much. There are some people who have missed Christmases and have missed Thanksgivings and haven't seen their families or haven't been able to hug their families until they've, finally been vaccinated. There are some churches who have been in person the whole time. There are some who have shut down intermittently. There are some like Foundry who haven't been back in person at all. And so there are varying degrees to which this pandemic has impacted both spiritual and emotional health. But what I will say is that I don't think we've really reckoned with the toll that this collective experience is going to have on our grief and on the way we continue to interact in the world from this point forward. It's something as a one that personally I try to deflect away from, right? I transition into action, everything that you're saying, or I'm unhealthy and I spiral into a 4 emo ball, which is exactly what I call it. I call it my emo ball. Nobody understands me. This is all existential. It's a whole thing. But as a clergy person, one of the things that I feel really is powerful in this moment as you're talking is that one of the things that we can perhaps do as messengers is say, yeah, this thing is confusing. Of course you didn't get it. As opposed to saying why didn't you get it? We've been talking about this the whole time. The CDC has been saying this from the very beginning. It's not about that. It's about this sort of the alchemy of this whole thing, which we really can't logistically or in a linear sort of sense make a whole bunch of action toward. What we really need to be doing is holding space for and sitting with people and saying are you having big emotions that you feel are misplaced? Yeah, guess what? Our whole country and world just went through this really, really traumatic thing.
Mm-hmm. Right.
We feel it in our bodies. We feel it in our souls. And what you were saying about how is God present in this moment? That's the question. How is God present in this moment? Not to remove yourself from this moment and seek God in some ethereal sense, right? Which, as we're talking about the ascension, it could be sort of a tool of convenience, right? This escapism ideal of Jesus will come again. Don't worry about it. But to seek God in the midst of what's happening right now, which is more confusion, less figuring it out.
Right. And the beautiful thing about this is Jesus says you need to go and wait, right? Because I'm going to send the Holy Spirit. And
waiting too, yes.
Right. And then they kind of don't fully understand still. And then so they're looking at Jesus, and the messengers give the exact same thing, you're to go and you're to wait. And what I find so beautiful is the next story or the next chapter isn't them going in some ethereal place and finding God, right? It's God in the form of the Holy Spirit descending upon the people, God coming to us, right? And that's not saying to go into what John Wesley talked about as quietism and we don't do anything, right? But it's to say that even in the confusion, even in the waiting, God has not abandoned us, and God is comforting, God is healing, God is doing amazing work, even in the midst of confusion and chaos. And Pentecost in and of itself can seem like a very confusing moment, right? Tongues of fire and wind and people speaking in different languages, but the Holy Spirit is bringing unity in the midst of confusion.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I think that's so, so important. I'm reminded of how, as you're talking about Pentecost, we just continue to use the word confusing. I would invite our listeners and us to sort of mine that word and to think a little bit about what that actually means. Because for me, it's sort of like a vortex of analysis and emotion and analysis of our emotion and inability to make sense of all of those things together collectively with whatever shit is happening around us, And so I'm just thinking about how that has been part of our story for a very long time. And actually, the beauty of the church is that we're all just kind of in this together, figuring it out. And honestly, we've gotten it wrong more than we've gotten it right. So we've talked about like a lot. I wonder if you feel like this text has anything to say specifically to parents.
Yeah, I mean, I think when we were talking about confusing, like, I don't know about the listeners, but I know parenthood is certainly very confusing to Kara and I. You know, are we making the right decisions, especially like in the middle of everything that's been going on, right? We were, my spouse is a photographer, and she's building her own photography business. And at first we didn't want to send him and William to school. And so Kara, being a stay-at-home mom, as well as trying to build a business from the ground up, like, was just very difficult. And so we made the decision to send them to the nursery school at the church. And we really wrestled with that idea. Is this the right decision? Is this the wrong decision? And I think the beauty of this story is, like, Jesus doesn't tell them to go and make decisions. He doesn't tell them to go and do anything. He tells them to wait, to go, pray, wait, and recognize that God is with you. And, like, I think that's such a peaceful and comforting word, not just to parents, but to all of the chaos in life, right? That we may not have the right answers all of the time, but that God is still with us, and that somewhere along the way, God will give us a little bit of light to illumine the path. And I think that's comforting.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it's also something that me as a parent needs to hear, that our listeners who are parents need to hear as well, is just like, it's a common theme on the podcast, but you're not alone. God is with you. We are with you. Like, we're all just figuring this out on this journey together. And an encouraging thing is just a reminder that we have access to Spirit whenever we want her, and that she has access to us all the time. Which is great, right? To know that any moment when things get hard, which, like, just to be transparent, this podcast right now, like, my kids are going nuts, and it's, as a one who wants this to be like super perfect and quiet, like, I have a child taking a surge protector and banging it on my luggage right now. And it's hard. The whole thing is hard. But what I can feel in myself a little bit is my anxiety starting to rise. And when I felt that, what I did what I usually do, which is kind of turn inward toward a posture of, like, whew, and all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well, Julian of Norwich. Right. Or like some kind of mantra that gives me access to tap into Spirit, who just says, yeah, girl, me too. Like, I hate when people do, like, colloquialisms for God speaking, but, like, to me, imagining Spirit as being like, yeah, girl, me too, like, is just real helpful, especially in this moment. So, yeah, I would just encourage, like, all of our listeners to find that point of connection with Spirit, however it comes for you, and to tap into it whenever you feel all of this confusion or being overwhelmed or any of those things, because that's what we're left with, right? And that's right. In the text that we were going to look at today, when Jesus prays for the disciples, like, that's what Jesus is saying. And it's present all throughout John, right? This gift of Spirit and what that looks like. And so, yeah, it just feels like a very poignant message.
I'm reminded of what Celtic theology talks about, the thin places, right? Finding those thin places where the Spirit and you mesh just so well. And, you know, for some that's nature, for some that may be a church building, for some that may be with your spouse or with your kid. I probably wouldn't say all the time with your kid.
Right.
From doing another parent confession. For others, it may be doing a certain activity. For some, you know, maybe whatever, but finding that moment where you and Spirit connect, those thin places.
Yeah, that reminds me of I had a professor in seminary who did a lot of work with a church at the Mexico-United States border. And there was this steel wall that obviously separated the people of the church. Like, people on both sides of this wall were celebrating together as the church. And there was kind of like a steel mesh covering. And so all you could fit were your pinkies through that. And that's how they passed the peace. And it's this very visceral representation of the thin places that you're talking about. Being able to find a break in the wall to be connected to our own humanity, to the humanity of others, because that's how we encounter Spirit, through one another and through meditation or whatever sort of practical things that we employ to communicate and be present with Spirit. So yeah, I'm so glad you shared that because it reminds me of that beautiful visceral picture.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to say about this text?
No, I mean, I think we talked about it all from the silly to the serious.
Yeah. This was really good. And I'm really, really happy that we got to do this particular text together. It felt good.
It did. It was good. It was good.
Okay.
I'm just still laughing. I just reread, Lord, is this the time when you're going to come to restore? It just made me laugh again.
Well, it has been an honor to be with you, and I'm so excited that we were able to do this together. So you want to say bye and let everybody know how they can get in contact with you if they so choose?
Yeah, it's been an honor too. Thank you so much, Casey. You can find me on Facebook. I'm a poor excuse for millennial. I only have Facebook. So if you just search Zach Moffat and Pulaski, you'll find me. Check out our church's Facebook page. Check out our church's website, FUMC Pulaski. If you're on Facebook, it's FUMC Pulaski, Tennessee. There's a Pulaski, Virginia.
Oh, yes, there is.
So two very different places.
Yes,
so
there
Pulaski,
is.
Tennessee. And if you're ever this way for any reason, listeners, come check us out. I'd be curious to why you're in Pulaski, Tennessee.
Fair. All right. Well, awesome. I will talk to you again soon. It was so good to see you.
Awesome. See you, Casey.
Thanks for listening to the Autoparent podcast. We're going to leave you with a parent mantra, something you can say to yourself or to your partner just to know that you're not alone. Your mantra for this week is, I have access to Spirit. I have access to Spirit. Because friends, if we don't believe that, it's going to be really hard to convince our kids. And remember this, you don't have to be an auto parent to be a good one. I've been your host, Pastor Casey. You can follow me on Twitter at RevKCVC. Join us next week, same time, same place. You can find out more information about Foundry United Methodist Church by visiting our website, www.foundryumc.org. If you're specifically looking for information about our Family Ministries department or our offerings for parents, you can find those at www.foundryumc.org/family ministries.